Since that fantastic 2021 season, the last 2 years have been full of hardships for this Michigan State football program. But enter Jonathan Smith, a builder of college football programs coming over to lead Sparty from Corvallis, Oregon. But can he build this MSU program into a winner in year number 1? Brendan Moore of Spartans Illustrated, Michigan State Rivals, joins me next to preview all things 2024 Michigan State Spartans.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
2024 begins a brand new era at Michigan State. It's the era of Jonathan Smith. To talk all things Michigan State Spartans and preview this season, we welcome in Brendan Moore from Spartans Illustrated, Michigan State Rivals, a part of the Rivals Network over there. Brendan, where I want to start with you, Jonathan Smith brings over a lot of Oregon State flavor into this Michigan State program right now, into East Lansing. Does that formula that they were able to build in Corvallis, do you think that's going to be able to translate early to what they have right now at Michigan State and then throughout the future as well?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on, Ted. And early, it's still kind of up in the air. Obviously, we'll see once the season comes along, but I do think it's going to pay off in the long run, bringing Jonathan Smith over from Oregon State, bringing him to East Lansing. But early, I mean, you look at what he did at Oregon State, wasn't in a good spot to start. It took a couple of years to really get that ball churning and to start producing winning seasons and consistently winning seasons. So to me, early, I do think there might be struggles in year 1 and year 2, but by year 3, year 4, year 5, I think you are going to start seeing Michigan State being talked about kind of in this 12-team playoff picture now and again.
Now, we're going to talk a lot about all of this Oregon State flavor coming in at a lot of different position groups. You know, Jonathan Smith brings over pretty much his entire offensive coaching staff over to Michigan State. Now, there may be no bigger Beaver acquisition than Aidan Chiles at the quarterback position to go along with that offensive coaching staff. And the interesting thing about his situation last year, playing behind DJ Uiagalelei today, this offensive coaching staff says, hey, we got to get you on the field for a drive. I believe it was the third drive of every game that Aidan Chiles led that entire drive at Oregon State. How do you think these pieces in this Michigan State offense really blend around the talents that Aidan Chiles possesses?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State, they do have some weapons, not up to the standard maybe teams in Michigan State's past, but I do think Chiles is such a huge addition for this team. At the very least, he's going to provide some entertainment for Michigan State fans. Even if the record doesn't turn out to be really good, Chiles is going to be a super entertaining guy to watch, true dual threat guy. And you mentioned it, he didn't play just garbage time for Oregon State last year. They got him in some big games in that third series of pretty much every game. I mean, and he played and he did decent. I mean, he had a 69% completion percentage, did not throw an interception, has some big rushing touchdowns as well. So, I mean, Chiles proved himself. Now, can he do it at consistent level? We'll see. He's only going to be a sophomore, so he's still really young. But the pieces around him, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more, but there are some pieces around him that I do think can really succeed. So we'll see.
Yeah, and that's the thing that really interests me. This guy is just not coming out where the last time he played football was high school football, right? You know, of course, 2 years removed from that, right? He's playing meaningful snaps, and that coaching staff, which comes along with him to Michigan State, really believes in him and his talents. Let's go to that other part of this offense that's maybe going to take some of the heat off of Aidan Chiles, and it's the run game. Okay, Nate Carter really took over as that RB1 last year. Jalen Berger is on his way out of this running back room. Enter K'Ron Lynch-Adams as well. Over 1,100 yards at UMass last season, 12 touchdowns for the Minutemen. He transfers over. It seems like there's going to be a 1-2 punch, 1A, 1B type of situation in the backfield. How much do you expect Brian Lindgren to lean into this run game in 2024?
Yeah, they like Nate Carter a lot, just from what we've been hearing in the spring and what we saw even in the spring game. He was the number 1 back. Obviously, Lynch-Adams wasn't there yet. So we'll see how they distribute the carries between Lynch-Adams and Carter. But I do expect those two guys to be your top 2. We'll see who obviously gets more carries than the other. But I do think they'll rely on these guys a lot. I mean, you look at what Damian Martinez was able to do the last couple of years at Oregon State, and now he parlayed that into a big-time transfer to Miami. So they're going to rely on the running backs a lot. And Jim Michalczyk, the new offensive line coach from Oregon State, offensive line coach, run game coordinator, one of the best offensive line coaches probably in the country, won some awards there. So he's going to do his part and make sure that this Michigan State run game is as efficient as possible. And I do think they got their guy in Carter, and the losses of Jalen Berger, they lost Jaron Mangum in the spring as well. I don't think those are two major losses because they brought in Lynch Adams, obviously. And then another name to watch out for is Brandon Tullis, who performed, I thought, really well in the spring game. There's room for him to be that third guy. So I do like Carter, Lynch Adams, Tullis as those top three in the running backs room.
Now, I think one of the reasons that they're going to lean into that run game is because there's still some question marks that may be existing out on the perimeter at the wide receiver position right now. They do return their leading receiver from last year. That was Montori Foster, 576 yards and 3 scores. But you got other returners on this team, the Jerron Glovers, the Antonio Gates Jr.'s, the Alante Brown, guys like that are returning, but didn't put up a ton of production. I know this team last year really leaned into the run game, but still, stats are stats, facts are facts, that they didn't put up a ton of production in this pass game this year. So you have those incumbents are really excited about Nick Marsh, a 4-star freshman, big target coming in as well. Who do you really expect to step up into those top roles at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, like you mentioned, there's some guys back, but they didn't do a whole lot production-wise last season. So there's room for some of these young guys to really step up and be starters. I mean, Montori Foster, we expect him to be a starter. Ditto with Alante Brown. He's more of a speedy slot type. Another speedy guy to watch out for. He's young, but Isaiah Johnson. He really stood out in the spring. He might... No, I'm not going to say he's going to be like a top 3 receiver on this team, but I do think you'll see him on Saturdays more and more. Nick Marsh, true freshman, instant impact player, made some big plays in the spring game. So he's another name to watch out for. Antonio Gates entered the portal, withdrew, came back. He's another young name. Jerron Glover, another young name. So there's young guys that need to not be young anymore. They need to, gain experience and step up because there's open spots. There's plenty of room for some of these guys to step up, and we'll see who does it.
Yeah, and Michigan State wants to be that surprise team. I believe this room is the room that really needs to step up and have some impact players. Now, when we talk about weapons and targets that Aidan Chiles can throw the football to, Michigan State might be one of those teams, those handful of teams in the Big Ten, where their leading receiver could very well be that tight end. And once again, we see more flavor from out west that donned the orange and black last season. Jack Velling at tight end, 438 yards, 8 touchdowns. He was a second-team All-Pac-12. He set the single-season touchdown record for Oregon State tight ends last season, replacing Malik Carr, a big target in more ways than one. Carr certainly was. Now, he's got that relationship with Aidan Chiles, of course. He's got this knowledge of the playbook. He's got this knowledge of the system and that relationship with this offensive coaching staff as well. What kind of weapon, all of that being considered, what kind of weapon do you think Jack can be for Aidan Chiles this season?
Yeah, he's going to be relied upon heavily because you look at what Oregon State did and what Brian Linger, the new offensive coordinator at Michigan State, and what he wants to do. He wants to use heavy tight end sets, whether it be 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 3 tight end sets. So Velling is going to be a key part of this. He's going to might just be an every down player. I mean, big time red zone target, obviously, probably an improved blocker as well from Malik Carr and Michigan State's tight end room last year. But the key for me in the tight end room, I'm pretty certain Jack Velling is going to be a stud based on what he did at Oregon State. He's proven in this offense. What I have my eye on is the tight end depth. Like I mentioned, Oregon State, Brian Lindgren, they like to use 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets sometimes. So that tight end depth is going to be key with Brendan Parachek. Tyneil Hopper is another name to watch out for. That'll probably get some snaps. But those 2 guys were banged up throughout the fall and throughout the spring. So those 2 guys' health are, in my opinion, that's the biggest part of this tight end room because I'm pretty certain Velling's going to pan out. He's going to be a real good tight end, maybe one of the top tight ends in the Big Ten. To me, it's all on Parachek and Hopper to really step up, stay healthy, and perform.
Now, when Jonathan Smith got hired as head coach at Michigan State, I think the first thing that really popped out to me is what they've been able to develop and build up front in the offensive line. And, of course, we know how big of a deal that is and how well that translates into being successful in the Big Ten. the OSU flavor continues with Tanner Miller as the anchor of this offensive line at center. Second team All-American, first team All Pac-12. Who do you expect? Because we got a good feeling, right? He's going to be anchoring this thing in the middle. Who do you expect to kind of fill in? Because there could be a lot of moving pieces on this offensive line.
Yeah, to me, I mean, this is probably the biggest question mark I have with this Michigan State offense is here on the offensive line. But Luke Newman's probably a name to watch. The Holy Cross transfer was not in for spring, so he's kind of a mystery. Can play guard, can play tackle as well. So there's some versatility there. I'm not sure which one he'll play. We'll see kind of during fall camp where he fits on this offensive line. But just like the wide receiver group, this is a unit where there's room for young guys to step up. You know, your redshirt sophomores like Christian Phillips, Ashton Lepo, Gavin Brocious, even a guy who was injured last year and now a redshirt freshman only is Stanton Ramil. So there's room for other guys to step up, even true freshmen. There's room for them to step up into this two deep. So to me, the depth is a big concern. Baldwin's all right. He'll probably play left tackle, I would imagine, again. So Michigan State offensive line depth is a big concern for me. I do like the addition of Miller and Newman. I think those two are going to be the top two offensive linemen, but depth with the loss of Nick Samek to the NFL, J.D. Duplain, there's some concerns depth-wise here for sure.
Heading over to defense, I got some mixed feelings when I look at this defense from a very broad view. This has been a defense that has struggled specifically on the back end, defending the pass, but you look at that and what this defense was with Scotty Hazelton, and then you look at what's coming in with Joe Rossi coming over from Minnesota, maybe one of the best coordinator hires in the Big Ten of this offseason. You talk 3 top 10 defenses nationally in 6 seasons in Minneapolis that he was able to produce over there at Minnesota. How much of a challenge do you think that Joe Rossi has ahead of him in kind of trying to flip this defense as much as he can in year one?
Yeah, it's not going to be an overnight change from, you know, a pretty bad defense in the Big Ten to all of a sudden, oh, whoa, they're a top 25 defense in the nation. It's going to take some time, to get his players recruiting-wise from the portal. Obviously, he made some portal moves, especially this spring, really tried to reload that secondary and kind of retool it a little bit. But I do like the Rossi hire, especially from what he did at Minnesota, was an excellent coordinator, probably one of the tops in the Big Ten. So to me, I like Rossi. He's implementing kind of a different scheme than what most Michigan State fans are kind of used to. Kind of going to play kind of a 3-4 hybrid type with a rush end, which is they can put their hand in the dirt. They can be a stand-up defensive end type. So there's going to be a little bit more versatility on this defense, I think, with that kind of formation. I do think you'll see some more pressure in the backfield. So to me, I like the Rossi hire. I like his scheme. We'll see if it pays off here this season.
Now, there were a good amount of spring transfer portal losses, which we will get into personnel-wise on this defense. But Cal Haladay, man, the heart and soul of this MSU defense, he is back and better than ever in the middle right there at linebacker. He's led the team in tackles for 3 consecutive seasons. Now, coming alongside of him, looking like Wayne Matthews transferring over from Old Dominion. High level of production last season, 135 tackles over there at the Group of 5 program. Who else needs to step up in this linebacker room for them to be possibly the strength of the defense?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Hall is only going to be a sophomore, but it seems like he's a veteran on this team, which is wild based on how much he played last year. So, I mean, the guy was an exceptional player as a freshman last year. I expect him to be a starter this year. Wayne Matthews, big-time ODU transfer. I mean, this linebacker room is probably the deepest unit on the defense, I would say, just based on the experience they have. Darius Snow's back. He's played a lot of college football, had some injuries, but hopefully he's healthy now. Cal Haladay, you mentioned him. Leading tackler for a couple of years now running. Jordan Turner's a name from Wisconsin, experienced guy as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of names at linebacker. I do think Hall, Haladay, and probably Matthews and Turner will be probably those top 4. But to me, I like them. I think this linebacker unit's pretty solid.
You know, even when you go back to that magical 2021 season where Michigan State was able to win 11 games, This secondary still gave up a lot of yards, even when they were winning a lot of football games. And then you look at these past 2 years, it was really magnified, right? Exactly the weakness that was the secondary. So you lose Jaden Mangum. He goes across the state up to Ann Arbor. He was an all Big Ten honorable mention type of guy back there at safety, could certainly make some plays. You bring back Angelo Gross, 35 starts over the last 3 seasons, 21 at safety and 14 over there at the nickel spot. Dylan Tatum, Chance Rucker, Charles Brantley, right? Those types of names are back as well in the secondary. Ed Woods coming over from Arizona State is a transfer to certainly keep an eye on. Do you see this group developing, and maybe how much of a step up can we expect this Michigan State secondary to make, a group that maybe has struggled over the last few years?
I think there's more talent than there has been in past years, even going back to that 2021, Scott, just because of the transfers that they brought in this spring. Now, how they fit, how they work chemistry-wise, we'll see. That's kind of the double-edged sword of these spring transfers. I mean, you're throwing them into the team pretty late in the offseason. So, but I mean, Jeremiah Hughes, solid player. Not sure how much he'll play this year. LSU transfer. Ed Woods, obviously. Nakai Martinez has a lot of experience from UCF. And you throw him in there with guys like Brantley, who has experience. Gross. Caleb Coley is probably a young name to watch out for. Chance Rucker, he's going into sophomore year. So there's a lot of still young pieces. Dylan Tatum's going to be a true junior. So he's still, this is his 3rd year, but he's still, I mean, only played 2 years of college football. So still got at least another year left here. But really a leader in this defensive back room. So I do think they'll take a step forward. How much? It's hard to say. I don't think it'll be a massive step forward. I think by increments, baby steps. I do think the secondary will improve. So yeah, I like some of the young pieces. I like some of the transfers, but I wouldn't get my hopes too high on this Michigan State secondary returning to kind of that what we saw back in 2013, 2014, 2015, that run in that D'Antonio area.
We've heard all about Jonathan Smith being a builder, and I think the more that we talk offense and defense, it's all about building and setting that foundation. So maybe in a couple of years they can get towards that 9 or 10 win level. Let's talk about this defensive line. Man, we talk about the hits that they took in the spring portal. Defensive line was right there at the front of it. They took the brunt of it. Of course, losing Simeon Barrow, he heads over to Miami. Derek Harmon, he goes over to Oregon. Now you get that Michigan State-Oregon trade of sorts with Ben Roberts, right, coming in on that defensive line to kind of take the spot up there. Georgia Tech's Daquan Dose as well you could throw in there. A lot of moving parts, right? Once again, a lot of kind of new faces in new places. Defensive line is no stranger to that. What is considered success, do you think? Because you're losing such 2 big pieces of that defensive line. What do you kind of want to see from these guys up front?
Yeah, I think number one is get in the backfield more. That's something, I mean, they weren't consistent enough last season. You look at the stats, and I mean, sack numbers were not all too impressive. I mean, the top guy was Aaron Brule, and he had 5 sacks. Jordan Hall, 4.5. So that's not quite enough. Need to get in the backfield a little bit more. And I think with Rossi's scheme, he can vary up the rushes a little bit more, the pass rushes. So I think you'll see that, even if the talent maybe drops off a little bit with the losses of Barrow and Harmon. And look, there's no replacements for losing those 2 guys. Those were big losses in the spring, but I do think Smith and I do think the staff did a decent job kind of backfilling with Ben Roberts, with Jalen Satchels, another transfer from Old Dominion, Ruquan Buckley from Nebraska, another transfer in the spring. So the interior, they've got guys. Now, I don't know who's going to start. Maverick Hansen's a veteran. I'm sure he'll get his playing time. Daquan Dowles will get his playing time. I won't be shocked if Ben Roberts starts. Jalen Satchel's got experience. So those are the 4 I have my eye on in terms of kind of who's going to get first team reps there and second team reps. But rush end is another position to watch. Chris Bogle, Jalen Thompson. Jalen Thompson, young guy who kind of did a really good job as a true freshman. Didn't play in all the games, but he really flashed in the games that he did play. So I'm looking forward to see what he does as a sophomore now. Bogle's an experienced guy, a transfer from Florida a couple years ago. Deion's a little bit of a question mark as well. I know they added some guys in the spring portal there as well. Quindarius Dunnigan did some good things in the spring game. So overall depth I think is there, but the top level talent I do have questions about, especially after you lose Barrow and you lost Harmon, who were 2 all Big Ten guys. So that first team I do think is going to suffer from that.
So when we start to look at this schedule, boy, Michigan State might have as tough of a 4-game stretch as anybody in college football in the middle of this thing. Home against Ohio State, at Oregon. Now you get a bye, thankfully, but then you got to play home against Iowa and then at the defending national champion Michigan Wolverines. Now, considering that stretch, that's a very difficult stretch, right? How much pressure does that put on them in the rest of the schedule? Because bowl eligibility, right, that 6-win mark, it seems like that's where Sparty wants to get to this season.
Yeah, I think 6 wins is a realistic goal and an attainable goal for this team. I mean, the ceiling for this team is probably, I would imagine, in the 7-8 win range. Yeah, I mean, you have to think Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan. Those are probably 4 losses right there, I would imagine. Most likely upset possibility would be that Iowa game since it's at home and they're coming off a bye. But, I mean, you got to do good in some of these other toss-up games. There's a lot of toss-up games on the schedule, whether it be at Maryland, Indiana game. Indiana's got a whole bunch of new guys, new transfers, so they're kind of a mystery team. We'll see what they look like. At Illinois, Rutgers is recruiting out of this world right now. They have some positive momentum, so there's a lot of toss-up games. If they win a majority of those toss-up games, I do think this team has a really good shot at reaching that 6-win mark and getting back to a bowl game.
Good stuff. Michigan State is going to certainly be a team to watch. Maybe the Aidan Chiles and the Jack Vellings, and then maybe this defense can develop under Joe Rossi. Brendan Moore from Spartans Illustrated, Michigan State rivals, talking all things 2024 Michigan State Spartans. Brendan, thanks for joining me today, and I'm sure we'll see you down the road.
Yep, thanks for having me, Ted.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.